I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. We've got a good program today. I'm going to talk about giving honor really to the great Harry Belafonte, an international artist, world-class creator, thinker, doer, actor, and activist in civil and human rights. We'll talk about his passing this week, I think at the age of 96. Harry Belafonte, guy that I met once, and just wonderful person to be around even for a few minutes. Then we want to talk about our main topic today will be the Minneapolis NAACP suing Minneapolis because of what they allege as covert social media surveillance by the police department. That's a big topic, and some more things as well. Before we begin, I want to invite you to support this program by going to our YouTube channel, YouTube Insight News, and becoming a subscriber. We want to build our contact, our relationships, sort of concretize them by virtue of you being a subscriber or member. You do that by going to YouTube Insight News and hit the subscribe button. You get notifications of when we're going live, but also take a minute and share this opportunity with your friends, your contacts. We want to get to where we got maybe 1,000 people and then grow from there. But our short-term goal is to get 1,000 subscribers in the program, and you can help us by becoming a subscriber yourself, and then by telling your networks and your friends. Also, we want to invite you to be a participant, to get involved, get engaged, to give us story ideas, to be on the program. We've got a form that we can send you if you ask for it, suggesting what you'd like to talk about and when you'd like to be on, and we'll try our best to make it happen. Well, the other thing that I want to mention today is an event coming up. The United Nations has a meeting here in Twin Cities in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that in a second as well. In fact, I'll start with that, actually bring it up again as one of our hot topics today. United Nations experts are going to visit Minneapolis next week on May 2nd. So they are in town to hear testimonies from the Black community, and they're coming to support those who are giving testimony. This event is going to be held, at University of Minnesota. Go to Insight News website. We'll put a link to it in our chat here, or in our links that you can see how to get to that testimony. United Nations coming to Twin City, big deal. It's an important deal. And if you want to share your story, your concern, or listen to what they are exploring, this is the way to do it. It's going to be May 2nd, 2023. What the lead thing I want to talk about is Harry Davis. Harry Davis, died just last week. He died at the age of 96 years old. There's a story in Insight News. Headline is that Harry Belafonte, activist, entertainer, dies at 96. And this piece is written by an AP national writer, Hillel Itali. Basically, the story with the New York Deadline says that Harry Belafonte, the civil rights and entertainment giant, who began as a groundbreaking actor and singer and became an activist, humanitarian, and conscience of the world, has died. He was 96 years old. Belafonte died Tuesday of congestive heart failure at his New York home. His wife, Pamela, by his side, said publicist Ken Sunshine. With his glowing, handsome face and silky, husky voice, Belafonte was one of the first Black performers to gain a wide following on film, and one of the first to sell one of the first of any entertainer to sell 1 million records as a singer. Many still know him from his signature hit, the Banana Boat song. They call it Day-O, and it's called for, Day-O, Day-O. Everybody remembers that. But he forged a greater legacy once he scaled back his performing career and in the 60s uh, began living out his hero, Paul Robeson's decree that artists are gatekeepers of the truth. What a powerful mission. So he stands as the model and the epitome of the celebrity activist. Few kept up with his time and commitment, and none his stature as a meeting point among Hollywood, Washington, and the civil rights movement. He not only participated in protest marches and benefit concerts, but he helped organize and raise support for them. He worked closely with his friend and generational peer, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., often intervening on his behalf when both politicians and fellow entertainers, uh, with both politicians and fellow entertainers, and helping him financially. He risked his own life and livelihood to set high standards for younger Black celebrities, scolding, for example, Jay-Z and Beyonce for failing to meet their social responsibilities, and mentoring artists like Common and Usher, Danny Glover, and many others. In Spike Lee's 2018 film, Black Klansman, he was fittingly cast as an elder statesman schooling young activists about the country's past. Well, I can tell you that I met Harry Belafonte in Jamaica at a conference put on by a New Yorker, a fellow publisher, Carl Rodney. Carl Rodney owns and publishes the Carib News in New York. And for years, his company has put on economic trade fairs and cultural trade fairs in Jamaica, throughout the Caribbean. And the idea was to bring entrepreneurs and communities and governments together to create exchange. And Harry Belafonte was one of his supporters and participants. And that's where I met Harry Belafonte at one of his conferences in, I think we were in Montego Bay several years ago. I can tell you, the guy is just an awesome presence, um, energy, just really, really, really down to earth. So down to earth, it had a celestial feeling to it. Calm, but fierce, piercing, and kind, all at the same time. There was a sense of no nonsense about him, and no sense of chatter for the sake of chatter. It seemed he was measured, calculated, precise, and clear in every syllable he uttered. And he came across as genuine, with the flash of every smile, with the wrinkling of his brow as he questioned what he was seeing or hearing. He telegraphed that. And you had the sense of fearlessness epitomized in him. So, tribute to the great late Harry Belafonte. I hope that in the weeks ahead, we'll have other people on who had a relationship with him, talk about their story, their meeting him, and what he meant to the world of art and to the world of of um, civil rights. In fact, let me jump to Yogi. Yogi is here from Bahia. Yogi Sena. Yogi, how you doing, man? And the reason I want to bring you into this conversation is because of the international energy that Belafonte brought to Black world music. Because, in a sense, it had not emerged on the world platform the way he was able to open up the entire world to the beauty and the depth of creativity out of our cultures. What do you think?
Well, as I was growing up here in Bahia, and and start to having awareness of things in the late 60s, 70s. So he was one of those icons and black persons that we look upon, because at the time there was not many examples or role models available. And also was every 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 black guy want to believe that themselves looks like him, you know.
Sure.
Included me. So, and principally with my height. But anyway, so he is one of those, trendsetters that influence the world for this Pan-African family that laid
Hmm.
to question others. There is a link directly from him to Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and so on. All this music from the Caribbean and all this Afro music that is today to him as being the first uh, who achieved the mark of 1 million records sold. So, and that's not a small feat for that time when there were so many racial barriers and difficulties. So it's um it's a sad loss,
Hmm.
but at the same time, um, he he had done his mission down here, and now he's gonna become one of our ancestors in Olorum and looking out for us, inspiring those who staying and maybe come back in a reincarnated in another, you know, great black man as he was, if you believe in reincarnation.
Okay. I got bounced out of the internet for a second, but I'm back. But Yoji, thank you. Let me ask our friend Jonathan Palmer. Jonathan is here from Hallie Q. Brown Community Center. And two things, Jonathan, a reflection on Harry Belafonte. Number one, what is music? What is presence? What is transformative engagement meant for Black culture and for world culture, number one. But I also want to take this second to have you begin this conversation on some breaking news. Uh, and the breaking news is that the white woman who accused the Black teenager Emmett Till of making improper advances before he was lynched in Mississippi in 1955, she has died in hospice care in Louisiana, according to a coroner's report. So we'll come back and talk about that as well in a second. So first of all, Brother Jonathan, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good, Al. Great to see you. Great to see you, Yoji.
Hey, how you doing, brother?
Good.
All right.
The death of Harry cannot be overstated. He had a huge impact on the world. One of the most fascinating things I discovered in just reading up more about him. He's always been a favorite singer of mine. I love the crooners from that age. Him and Sam Cooke are just you can't top them in my mind. And he was such a pivotal person in terms of who he knew, how he used his stage to be an activist and to bring the message. And one of the ways he did that I just learned about was that in February of 1968, for a week, he hosted The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson at that time saw what was going on in the country, recognized to his credit that he was not the person to be able to bring the necessary conversation to the stage, and asked Harry Belafonte to host. And so he literally for a week in 1968 hosted The Tonight Show. He had Dr. King on as one of his guests, Robert Kennedy, Paul Newman, Aretha Franklin. So it was a week of discussion, and that's one of the ways in which he used his platform to bring the issues that were going on to light and to help people see more of what America was. So we've lost. I heard somebody phrase it as our great oak. He is somebody who had such a strong impact. There is also, I'll mention a little known movie. It is not the greatest movie, but it's a very poignant movie called White Man's Burden. And it's him and John Travolta. And what it does is it reverses the positions in society of Black people and white people. So white people in the movie are in poverty, are in the underclass that we often occupy, and Black people are the ones who are rich. And it takes a situation where John Travolta gets fired, and for nothing other than, oh, he did something, and Harry Belafonte is the owner of the company, didn't just pay any attention to it and just said, just get rid of that guy. And he ends up going over to Belafonte's house and kidnapping him, all trying to just get his job back. But one of the most striking pieces in there is him getting a action figure for his kid. And the hero is called Chroma Man, and it is a big guy, black skin, very much the hero, and the white character is smaller and kind of sidekick. And he keeps trying to have his son play with the white character, and his son's like, "No, I want Chroma Man. Chroma Man is the best." And so it's just a nice flip of the way things are, and it really gets you to think about how we view society and how things happen through a different lens, because you're looking at different people in different positions.
I'm going to have you come back and talk about the headline, the breaking news about the death of Carolyn Bryant Dunham, who was 88, who died in hospice. She's the woman who accused Emmett Till in Mississippi in 1955. The accusation led to his lynching and his death, and that's been a turning point, I think, just as the current cases are in the civil rights, human rights movement. But let me bring in Angela Rose Myers. Angela, how are you, my friend? Good to see you again.
Hello.
And I want you to respond to all of the above. Number one, Harry Belafonte, as you would like to, but also to this breaking news story about the woman in Louisiana who was the accuser in the death that led to the death of Emmett Till. But before, I want you to talk about the news here in Twin Cities that I mentioned in the opening, that the Minneapolis NAACP is suing Minneapolis, alleging covert social media monitoring or surveillance by the police. And the article that we have on it says that Minneapolis NAACP leaders on Wednesday filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Minneapolis over police officers' alleged use of stealth social media accounts to keep tabs on and criticize Black community leaders. That allegation came to light last year as part of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights investigation into the MPD's practices and culture following the May 2020 murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. The article goes on to say that Minneapolis officers posed as Black community members on social media to criticize city officials and members of the NAACP, work that wasn't part of any criminal investigation, Human Rights Commissioner Rebecca Lucero said at the time. And the officers also allegedly used the accounts to track the activity of Minneapolis NAACP members and to push racist stereotypes about Black people, the NAACP said in its statement on Wednesday announcing the lawsuit. They called the racial discriminatory surveillance unconstitutional, and they're asking people to support their effort in this lawsuit. Angela, you were at the center of the work of the NAACP in Minneapolis as a former president, and I'm presuming that one of the ones surveilled was you, Angela Rose. What can you tell us about that, and why is it important that this lawsuit has happened, and where will it go?
Yes. And so, yes, I was also part of the NAACP social media team, running the social media in 2019, 2020, 2021. And that is the crucial aspect. It's not just a troll, right? It's not just a random Russian bot that we were dealing with. These folks who were engaging with messaging, private messaging, posting beneath our, social media posts, things like that, as pretending to be Black Minneapolis community members that we, or the NAACP, are beholden to, right? They were the Minneapolis Police Department. So, that is a infringement upon our rights. And then also it goes into showing in the lawsuit the claim that Nakima Levy Armstrong has with the fact that allegedly, and this is also in the MDHR report, but it doesn't name Nakima, that through a private event, right, these police officers RSVP'd as, in social media blackface, right? RSVP'd to her private event, showed up and got the event, shut down to the point where people were feeling very uncomfortable. The venue, the restaurant where they had it at, kept on coming back to her around the presence of the police. And so not only is it, and she was running for mayor at the time. This is right after she was president of the Minneapolis NAACP. So not only are they trying to craft an agenda, right, on social media about, what is the political leanings of Black folk in Minneapolis, which is completely untrue. They were also actually showing up and intimidating people at their event, at Nakima's event. So there are issues around the crafting of the political agenda of the NAACP. Also, there are police officers who were members of the NAACP at times. Did they go home, write reports about the meetings and about how to craft the political agenda of this civil society organization? We don't know. So we don't know the full extent of what this surveillance looked like. We know what came out in the MDHR report. We filed in October of last year a Freedom of Information Act request about, to get more information about what type of surveillance happened, who were the officers, who did they contact, engage with, all of this information MDHR and the city have. Well, the city says they don't have this information. MDHR keeps the claim that they have this information. And the Freedom of Information request was essentially ignored and neglected. And so what's the next step to find out what the full extent of this surveillance is, other than, boom, we have to file a lawsuit. And we're hopefully through this discovery process, the community, the citizens of Minneapolis, the people of Minneapolis, Black activists, we can find out what the tactics and what the full extent of surveillance looks like when it comes to the Minneapolis Police Department targeting and surveilling Black activists, not connected to any investigations. And then also, while they were spending time on the city's dime surveilling us, they were not surveilling white supremacist organizations at all. So that's also a discriminatory practice, because there are real threats. As the Southern Poverty Law Center says, there are real white nationalist, white supremacist organizations in Minneapolis and Minnesota, and they weren't spending any time on them, but rather on us. This last week, we had 2 mosques that were put on fire, right? That seems like something of an organized attack. I don't know. Maybe the Minneapolis Police Department should spend time focusing on investigating white nationalists who, after January 6th, took on the Capitol during the uprisings, were in North Minneapolis shooting at NAACP volunteers. Maybe Minneapolis Police Department should focus their time and effort on the real domestic terrorists instead of a civil society organization like the NAACP.
Great. Talk about the case or review, the passing of the woman from whom allegations led to the murder of Emmett Till.
There's it's interesting how much has surfaced in the last few years about the case with Till and about the woman specifically. Every time this comes around, more and more begins to come out, and we learn that there's a lot of aspects that were not really revealed. Last year in June, the researchers discovered an arrest warrant for Carol Bryan Dunham for kidnapping that was made out but never served. And then everybody involved started backpedaling and talking about it wouldn't make sense to serve it, and there's not really a reason why it wasn't served. But you get more and more coming to light about the fact that she knew what her involvement in this situation, although she claimed not to know that this would lead to his death. But if you know Mississippi, and you know your husband and his, I think it was his brother-in-law, then you knew what was going to happen. And actually, she wrote a biography called "I'm More Than a Wolf Whistle," which means, again, drives back home the point that she is at the center of this. She knows her role in this. Her passing, does not bring comfort to anybody, because there's no accountability that has happened for the actions. The Emmett Till represents a significant point in the history of America, because it was a point where people could see the brutality of systemic racism and the unchecked rage that came from white anger. And we look at that now, that it is still a living piece and still a connection that people understand and are aware of, and has yet to be resolved in any way. Going forward with this, we really need there to be a larger level of accountability. The fact that, just for a side, the officer who shot Breonna Taylor and killed Breonna Taylor is now in another law enforcement division. How do you get your job back after you do something like that? It just goes to show that there is a significant issue within the institution of law enforcement. It doesn't mean all cops are bad. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we need to abolish the police, but we need to really look at the history and the structure of the system. And Carolyn Bryant Dunham's death can hopefully bring that discussion up, so that people have real conversations about this, instead of what we typically do is have all of our issues being brushed over and brushed off.
Well, to me, it's important to draw the line of connection between the Emmett Till case and the George Floyd case. And the George Floyd case is at the center of the NAACP lawsuit. What the police did in response to activism in the community, and that highlighted by the death of George Floyd and the activism that emerged from that. And so, and all the points in between. The question is, society wanted us to count these individual atrocities as one-offs. It just happened that time. What we know is that what has happened was part of policy and practice abroad throughout the entire country. And in fact, it was policy and practice throughout the hemisphere. And that's why it's even important to bring in this conversation the experience of African people throughout the hemisphere. All of us, at one level or another, the product of the transatlantic slave trade, and all of us in resistance to efforts to continue to dehumanize and exploit our bodies, Black and brown bodies, to efforts to disregard our humanity and take our lives wholesale, to expend them, to extract from them, to support a policy of extraction that applied not only to human beings, but to the material resources of the planet. One and the same, for the benefit of what I call Western or European, capitalism, supremacy. You can call it any number of things. And so, Yoji, let me bring you into this conversation as well, sort of sewing this together. What's the connection between African people in the diaspora broadly, the history of oppression, and how we have always and continue today to resist, to revolt, and to make our voices known, and that what's not known is how successful we are in creating and maintaining and growing resistance. And it's not known because we don't control the mass media. And so when we have successes, the successes are underreported, but the deficiencies, the quote unquote deficiencies that we appear to be bringing to society are overreported, and therefore the exploitation continues. Yoji Sena, what do you think?
Well, you are very happy when you say that situations like what happened to Emmett Till is tried to be portrayed as a one-off, when it's something that has been happening regularly, continued to happen, and also happen, as you mentioned, in the whole hemisphere, where there is these populations that are descendant of the slave trade, the people brought in by the slave trade. So these kind of happenings, be it killed by a vigilante and by police, happens in every single place where we are present, and always has been portrayed when happens as an anomaly. And as you also mentioned, that I agree, any failure that one of us do is overblown publicly to as a form to maintain that narrative of our inferiority or supposed inferiority, and to be genetically predisposed to trouble. The thing is, we, as you say, about the exploitation of the commodities that is being done by the people from Europe, is because also us, you have been seen in the time of slavery, we are seen as a fuel, not as human beings. We're fuel. You were like oil today, coal. We were what make things run with our physical labor. And so until today, they don't see us as human, because in a certain way they equate us as fuel.
Mm-hmm. Expendable.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Once burn out, we're gonna find somewhere else more. You know.
And that explains too when the movement of slave trade on the high seas was banned, outlawed. They pivoted to uh, what I would call animal husbandry, right? The treating of Black people uh, like stock to replenish their free labor. How horrible!
Yeah,
How horrible!
we we know that the slavery went for around 500 years, right, from the 1500s until the 1800s, where what outlawed was the slave trade from Africa to America. So
Mm-hmm.
when that was outlawed, there was the inter-America slave trade. So Brazil, who received 6 million slaves, where there was the husbandry of slaves in the United States, but as well there was the inter-American slave trade, where the British Navy was not policing those boats that are going up and north-south. They're policing those that are crossing, east to west from Africa to America. So this situation continued for a while, as the case of that boat that they found in the swamp. I can't remember now the name. Was well into many years after the abolishment of the slave trade. So
Jonathan, jump in.
So one of the biggest issues that comes out of all of this is understanding, just the not just the indignity and the brutality of slavery, but you can look beyond that to see some of the outcome. Reparations is a real big issue that's coming out of this, and it's a very challenging piece. And when you look at right now, there is a Senate candidate. His name is Bernie Moreno. He's gonna be Republican to run against Sherrod Brown. He is saying that it's actually white people who are owed reparations for slavery, not black people, because he said that in America, white people died to free the slaves. And that hasn't happened in any other country. So where's the reparations for the people from the North who died in order to free the slaves? And so apparently he's not aware of the fact that slave owners were actually compensated by the U.S. government for the fact that their slaves were freed. Apparently he's not aware of the fact that the only successful slave revolt in the world, Haiti, had to pay reparations to France for independence for 122 years, I believe it was, resulting in about $21 billion out of their economy. Having no understanding of the issues, you should really think about whether public office is for you or not. But the bigger issue here is this misunderstanding of history and this misconception that has come along where the truth of history has been covered over, has been whitewashed, has been buried beneath it. I mean, 2 years ago was when people first realized Juneteenth was a thing. 3 years ago was when they first found out about Tulsa from a TV show. And so there is so much of the history of America that has been buried in order to propagate the system of white supremacy, in order to keep people from asking questions, examining critically the systems that we have in place, and looking at everything from the wealth gap to the improper policing to the fact that we have companies and institutions built upon the backs of slave labor. The University of Minnesota itself got its money from a slave owner who loaned it to turn it from a boys' school into the university. Slavery runs through the fabric of America. It is part of our beginning. It is part of the systems that still exist today. And until we reconcile with that, until we actually take a good, clear look at the impact of the systems that are in place today and how Black and brown people continue to be behind, we will never be at that place where all lives matter, where equality is rampant throughout our country, where the American dream can actually be said for everybody and not just white people.
Angela, what are your thoughts?
I would agree. I would just also hold Emmett Till's family in our minds right now. The family, Deborah Watts, who's based in Minnesota, they have had a major, policy pushes on anti-lynching throughout the U.S. But the number one thing that kept on coming up in my conversations with them and what they've been trying to do is for the arrest of Carol Bryant Dunham. And they also raised the fact that she, a couple of years ago, admitted to lying on Emmett Till and then retracted her statement. And they want some type of accountability for the fact that even if the woman was at the time, 80 something years old, 70 something years old, they said, well, you could put Bill Cosby in jail, you could put this woman in jail too. And just some type of accountability through the legal system, and they never got that. I'll also say, since you linked Emmett Till to the NAACP currently, it was Mamie Till Mobley who really went on tour throughout the country with the NAACP to get members for the civil rights movement. And it is amazing how Black women, Black mothers have birthed this movement, the movement that we are in right now across the world. I think of Francia Marquez, the vice president of Colombia. She often talks about, the Black mothers that she works with in Colombia, fighting police brutality, fighting white supremacy. The Mothers Against Police Brutality group nationally, they've invited the UN, the United Nations, expert mechanism on law enforcement and racism to the US to go to about 5 different cities in the US to investigate law enforcement and racism. So I do want to uplift that the work of Mamie Till Mobley is not ended, with the death of Carol Bryant Durham and the work of all of these other mothers who have lost sons and daughters to police violence, to white supremacy, and to, white violence. Their work is not over. And so we should hold them in our hearts again, too.
Well, Angela, I'm so glad you keep bringing up the work of Black women, of mothers. And I always throw this back to you because I want to hear you stretch out on it. How do you assemble all of the information? How do you make that connection between what happened with Emmett Till and what happened with the NAACP here in Minneapolis? What happened with George Floyd? How do you make that connection with what happened with women in the world? And the penultimate question is, how do we examine the culture itself, the Western culture? And I've brought this to you before, the question of the patriarchal hierarchy. At some point in time, as human beings, do we have to examine the consequence of that structure of arrangement and of determining what existence really is? What do you think?
Yes, I definitely agree. And I would say that the patriarchy is so intertwined with white supremacy. White supremacist violence is patriarchal violence. How I move through the world as a Black woman, is shaped by and through white supremacist systems. The country, the state, and we see right now, even with all of these anti-trans, anti-queer policies, there is an invested interest in shaping and even molding and seeing and having an ideal body in the country. And that body looks like it has this genitalia, it has this expression, gendered expression. And then if you do not fit within that box of what this state wants, then you are seen as a demon to society. You are seen as a terror to society. And so we have to address that too. I mean, it's amazing that we are still trying to fight for the Equal Rights Amendment. And the Equal Rights Amendment basically, was never ratified in this country, but it still had a gendered binary. It said, let's make sure women have equal rights as men, not let's make sure everyone experiences and enjoys equal rights, no matter their gendered expression, their sexuality, their genitalia. And so that we're still in this place where Black trans women are being murdered at extremely high and disproportionate rates. We're still at a place where trans folks in, elected officials are being silenced on the floor and being kicked out of doing their job. And so, to view it through a white supremacist lens, right? And how is this connected to white supremacy? We'll also have to ask, what was the benefit for white supremacy to create Black women, for the reproductive labor that Black women had during slavery? Modern gynecology and the current modern cesarean was first performed on enslaved Black women in the US and in Brazil. So, even though Black women now, we are the highest when it comes to mortality rates when we are pregnant and when we are giving birth, the first modern cesareans were performed on us. When we're talking about the racial science of when in the 1800s, white folk, they wanted to make sure that the white people were at the top of the racial hierarchy. Was it Latinos or the mestizo? Were they next? Or was it Indian, indigenous people? Or was it Black people who they were struggling in Latin America and in the US of what does it look like? Who's better than who has the larger frontal lobe and the largest things like that. They were also examining Black women. They had Sarah Bartman, the Hottentot Venus from South Africa, and they were measuring her genitalia, measuring her buttocks. And they actually, in France, kept her body preserved for over 100 years just to make the argument. You see, that's why Black women only are good for nursing our children and only good for labor in the fields. The first account of African women that Europeans, wrote down was saying that, African women actually have 6 arms. 6 arms. Their breasts hang so low, they can suckle over their shoulder. They can suckle their babies over their shoulder. This was the dehumanization of Black people and utilizing Black women's bodies as a justification of the further dehumanization of Black people. That is a crucial aspect of the race science that was happening during slavery. So, why we have to link also white supremacy with the patriarchy is because the Black women, Black folks dehumanization, just our bodies and ourselves and how it was gendered and how it was sexualized was used to perpetuate these white supremacist goals and policies.
Yoji, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree 100%. It's
I think we lost him. Jonathan, jump in.
I just want to echo everything, and Angela said it brilliantly. I mean, and where I think there is an important role for men or male presenting people is to go ahead and reinforce that, to be able to say, especially to other men, that the fact that that the battle still rages on, that men are somehow seen as the standard of righteousness or perfection, that when we say things like women can do this as good as a man, no, women can do anything, and women are often better at many things, and female presenting are often better. And so we've got to get out of this gendered kind of stereotypes that we have. We've got to move beyond the place of using men, and especially cisgender white men, as being the standard of which we measure everything else against, and instead start taking a look at what individuals bring, start taking a look at the fact that language evolves. If you can say staycation, you can use somebody's pronouns the proper way. If we go ahead and look at the idea of what Black people went through for the last several hundred years, the battles that are coming on for trans people, for the entire LGBTQ plus community, for women, are ones that we should all be on the front lines with, arms linked and fighting for those same rights, because it is a big divide and conquer. They split us off into groups. They focus on one specific thing or two specific things, and they get us to turn on each other, and they get us to join in the rallies. And instead of focusing on the injustice that is built into our systems, the opportunities that just looking at the silencing of the Montana representative, looking at what happened in the Tennessee House, it is repulsive how much action is being taken against people who represent constituencies that are not cisgender white men. And so we all need to be banding together. We all need to be working towards that common goal and supporting everything that Angela just said.
Yoji, we lost you for a minute. Do you want to continue?
Yes. The thing is the irony of Jonathan was mentioned, the guy in Texas called Moreno, right? And he's defending or presenting stuff in favor of white supremacists. And the word moreno, you know where it comes from, right? We
Black people,
Moors.
brown people, yeah, more.
So you know, we are in a time that certain, in some way, it's crazy in certain way that people are in certain way confused, very in fear, and trying to in many ways stop this adjustment for justice that has been happening in the world. They are very worried that that, that they're gonna be losing their privileges, or they're gonna be a mass, uh, you know, justice that we're gonna. The other day, I saw here on the internet this young lady saying that they're lucky that we are just looking for justice. You know, that is the only thing that we black people are asking is for justice. We're not looking for get back to them
Hmm.
or anything, but in fact, in the back, they have this fear that in a certain way is going to improve in a certain way, that we're going to end up doing to them what was done to us.
Hmm.
And they're trying to prevent. The only
And
justification
not
for this
the way,
worry.
not even the way you said it. You said we're going to do to they fear that we're going to do to them what was done to us. Yes, and I put it even more succinctly, they fear that we're going to do to them what they did to us, because they are the ones that were the perpetrators. So they objectivize it, saying what was done, as if somebody else or the times or the environment did it. But we are saying no, there are specific incidents and specific cruelties, and it was them. Things that were
Yes,
done, they did. But go ahead, I'm
They
sorry.
continue to do.
And continue to do. Yeah,
exactly.
right,
It's
right.
even the thing. Like yesterday, I was talking to a friend about here. People do sometimes express their prejudice more openly, and mine was say statement was racist against African religion. I was luckily that to explain look back every religion until today and historically who perpetrates violence, and then because you see offer in the corner that along the offer there is a trident, you are, oh, this is the devil, all this kind of stuff, and that we are contagiously dangerous, where Islam along with Christianity and Judaism as accomplice has killed millions of people throughout the history. And they, you know, and this is one of the bastions that we gotta come eventually, right, to question. Like for example, yesterday in certain way, this Pope invited women to the decision bodies of the church, or something semi-important that happened yesterday. Francis, you know, now women is gonna participate in the choices of bishops. So and so, but all these institutions, also the main religion, is my main justification that people say I cannot follow the religion of the people who enslaved my ancestors. Does not make sense. When with time and this process in certain way also do happen when I lived in the U.S. I cannot, if I stop to think coldly, how can I follow Christianity? It was one of the biggest tool to our oppression, one of the biggest source of strength to the white supremacists to perpetrate their atrocities throughout the, you know, and not talking about what the priest did to youth. You never, you know, talk
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. That's a great topic. I want to come back to that later. I'm reading right now and watching videos of the historian and philosopher Jacob Carruthers. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Carruthers' writing or speeches, but they are fascinating. And as I read more, I want to be able to come back to this group and have this conversation, particularly Yogi, because he's writing about spirituality in the African culture and about his mission. His point that I'm getting so far is that we all have to figure out how to go back home. That life's journey is a journey back home, and getting home is the pathway to self-awareness, to self-knowledge, to freedom, completion, and to evolution. Home to him, he said, is reflected in the journey of the Pan-Africanist educator and writer Edward Blyden, who started off as a missionary and then left the Christian church, became a Muslim while he was in Liberia doing mission work because he recognized that Christianity wasn't delivering. He discovered that when he went to Liberia to save the Liberians, the natives, what he discovered was that he needed to save them from Christianity. And therefore he converted to Islam, but he discovered the same thing there. And over the course of his decades, he experienced evolutionary thinking where he left Islam and had the chance to provide a critical analysis of all of the three major Western religions. You mentioned that Judaism, that tradition, the Muslim tradition and the Christian tradition, and finally found himself going back into discovering what was African spirituality, African ways of knowing, and that summarized by Vodun, by Condomblé, by Santeria, by all of those traditional and historic ways in which we saw ourselves connected to every other thing in existence. The relationship of the individual to the all, and of the all, its presence in the individual, and that bond being what sacredness really is. Well, I'm going to stop there because we're about out of time, but this conversation leads me there. And I want to have this conversation with you, Angela, and with you, Jonathan, and with you, Yoji, and examine deeply. In fact, Carruthers' speech talks about thinking deeply or going to the deep well of African spirituality. And I want to have us go there and think deeply about history, legacy, its relationship to this moment, and the obligation of formation of futures by the things we do and say, believe and reflect and build right now in relationship to one another. Well, we're out of time. Jonathan, so good to see you. Angela, so good to see you. Thank you for your brilliance, as always. I love listening to you. Yoji, you always bring a powerful and wonderful and beautiful voice to these conversations. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.